Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Rezolve AI reported earnings this morning that blew away most people's expectations. In fact, even the wild card for the earnings, which was 2026 guidance, was released. Yeah. We need to talk about this in today's episode. What it means for the stock, what happened to the stock today. Let me put this into a little bit of context for you. Am I in Rezolve? Did I sell out? Am I planning on buying more? I'll give you the game plan, my strategy in this video as well. So first and foremost, we're going to go over the raw numbers, what the guidance is, go over the conference call, what was said, some of the major highlights, any new information will be highlighted in today's episode, and then go over my position, my thoughts, and the path ahead for the stock. Because I know some people are going to look at Rezolve right now, and it's up about 3% on the day today. It was up about 20%. It kind of slipped throughout the day today. But that doesn't matter. Almost expected. So the work is cut out for us here in today's episode. Hit that like button as well as subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Check out that link down below in the description of today's episode if you want to come join the trading community. But with that said, let's get started with the numbers that came out today from Rezolve. Okay, so Rezolve AI raises 2025 guidance to $150 million in ARR. This was my expectation. $150 million. That confirms that growth is accelerating, that the business is doing very well. And they initiate 2026 guidance to $500 million in ARR exit rate as strong growth shatters analyst forecast. Here's some of the key highlights here. 6.3 million first half revenue, up 426% year over year versus 5.1 million for the consensus. Adjusted EBITDA at 17.7 million versus 18.7 million adjusted. These are in losses. Okay. Now the Brain Suite is now agentic commerce ready. Gross margin at 95.8% versus 60 to 70% as the consensus. 100 plus enterprise customers, including Ferrero, H&M, and Urban Outfitters. BrainPower white paper confirms competitive performance versus GPT-4 and Claude with effectively zero hallucinations. That just shuts down half of the short report that just came out for the company, saying that Rezolve is basically a ChatGPT wrapper and that it hallucinates. And we're going to dive into that in just a moment when we go over some of the highlights from the conference call. But again, most importantly here, it says Rezolve has now secured over 90 million in ARR year to date and is raising guidance to a minimum, highlight minimum, of 150 million ARR exit rate for 2025. Looking further ahead, Rezolve today set 2026 guidance at 500 million ARR exit rate. Here's the deal. I don't give a shit what happens to the stock today. Okay? Don't care. Why? Because we got the numbers. Here's the deal. Rezolve trading at about a $1.2 billion market cap with 2025 ARR. That's at about 8 times price to sales. Well, how does that compare to other companies? Glad you asked. Tempest AI. Price to sales ratio of 14.31. That's trailing 12 months. So not even with a forward, but trailing, which is kind of, the number I just went over. Big Bear AI at 12.13. SoundHound AI at 47.41. But when you think about 2026, which everyone is going to really start focusing on now as we get into the end of this year into 2026, 500 million in ARR translates to, let's do the numbers here, to 2.4 for a price to sales metric. If we're currently trading at an 8, okay, you're looking at substantial upside potential there. Maybe a 3.5x roughly, at least, minimum. Could put the stock at about $17.33. Again, by the end of this year, minimum. Not to mention, we should probably be trading higher than, an 8 times price to sales, when most of other well-known AI stocks are trading anywhere between, 12 and 40 times price to sales. So when I say I don't give a shit what the stock does, it's because of that. This confirms the valuation discrepancy. Now, what happened to the stock today? Why did it start off so strong and then end so poorly? It's simple. So simple, it's almost stupid. For anyone that was in the stock, short report came out, that decided to hold until earnings, any of those residual bears, if you will, are exiting their position today. Okay. That's what this is about. The bears are exiting their position today. This reaction has nothing to do with the numbers. If you're looking at the numbers by themselves, the stock should be up 50% today. That's what matters. Okay. But since the short report came out about 2 days ago and we just had earnings today, there is still a lot of residual bears. Okay. And although this earnings was much better than most people were expecting, there's still going to be that selling pressure there because the short report just came out 2 days ago. Okay. But this to me confirms an end of the year rally. October, November, December are shaping up to be very strong as Wall Street starts to focus more on that 2026 ARR target. The stock is substantially undervalued. And to me, it's only a matter of time before this thing explodes higher. Okay. That's kind of my view. So really, like today, tomorrow, next couple of days, you don't really want to look into the price action of the stock all too much. It's not going to make a lot of sense, right? The stock should be up 50% today. It's not. We had a short report that just came out. We just had like the first real earnings from the company basically in their history. And there's going to be some weird reactions to that. Okay. But once you clear out those residual bears, there's going to be a lot of buying pressure. You can bet your ass that institutions today love what they heard. Absolutely love what they heard. And I am going to share the intro of the conference call with you guys, maybe a minute long, where Dan Wagner directly goes on the offensive from, on these short seller allegations from Fuzzy Panda. I want you guys to hear this. And then after this about 1 minute long clip, we will get into the highlights from the conference call. A lot of what was discussed on the conference call, we've talked about many times before on this channel because we're very well-rounded in the stock at this point. But I do want to share with you some of the maybe unexpected comments on the conference call. But again, first, let me pull it up. This is from the live that we did today to cover the conference call. We initially went over the numbers in the Discord. So again, if you guys want to join that, check it out. Link down below in the description of today's episode. But let me play you the first 60 seconds of the conference call today. Take a listen.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Before we get into the results, I want to address something directly. In recent days, anonymous short sellers have attempted to spook genuine investors with publications that are libelous, misleading, and scurrilous in nature to the extreme. These so-called reports are nothing more than a collection of baseless allegations made by cowards who hide behind anonymous entities and cite anonymous sources. Nothing they publish is on the record. Nothing is validated. And because they refuse to stand behind their words, they cannot be held to account for their disgraceful actions. Let me be blunt. This is market abuse. It is designed with one objective: to take money out of the pockets of real investors by deliberately spreading false and alarmist narratives. It is shameful, it is manipulative, and it should be stamped out by the authorities. If there were a mechanism to hold these people legally liable, we would pursue it. Until then, the best response is what we are here to discuss today: facts, results, and the extraordinary progress Rezolve has achieved. That is the truth, and that is what investors deserve. So, this is an exciting time for Rezolve as we find ourselves at the forefront of an AI revolution that is sure to transform online search and digital commerce, a market that, in our view, is well past its sell-by date. Our first half results not only beat expectations, but also allowed us to raise guidance to 150 million ARR for 2025 and set a new 500 million ARR target for 2026.
I thought that first segment, the intro really to the conference call was quite decisive, quite on the offensive. And again, with the results we got from Rezolve today, legally binding results, it really just shuts down that whole short report. But unfortunately, you can't take it away. It's something that Wall Street's going to have to settle with for a period. And that's why I think there is these, residual bears. Even think about retail investors that are like, okay, yesterday maybe they're like, I'm down on my position today. Maybe they bought in at $7 or something. I'm just going to call out a number here. Maybe they bought in at $7 and they're like, okay, I'm going to see it through from the conference call. And maybe they were expecting, 200% rally after the conference call. They're like, well, shit, the stock's only up 20% today. I'm just going to cut my losses. Okay, sell out at $6. Okay, fine. You that's great. And a lot of those maybe retail investors, they're not understanding the gravity of the numbers that were announced today, right? So this residual selling has to do with the traders. It has to do with the guys that just want to cut their losses, not the investors that hear the numbers and see the results and see the numbers today, right? That's that residual selling. Those individuals that plan to sell after the earnings, almost regardless, unless there was a crazy big move. So it's one of those situations where over the coming days, once that residual selling stops and people start to internalize the numbers, you're going to see the stock move substantially higher, in my view. Hey, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a financial planner. We were kind of spot on with the earnings. Like we predicted it down to a T. And that would be my prediction going forward. Once the residual sellers are gone, which is likely after today, you're going to get that upside move from this earnings. It was huge. Now, here are some of the highlights from the conference call. I wrote down here, momentum in the business is accelerating and well-positioned to continue growth into 2026. They reference at least a decade of scalable ARR growth. The cash burn is 2.8 million per month, which is nothing in relation to projecting 500 million in ARR next year. I did not catch specifically when they expect to be profitable. Maybe you guys can enlighten me down below in the comment section. I did not personally catch that. I was also not pretty, but kind of distracted. Was talking to people in the live, so I will take credit for that. But I don't think they actually said definitively when they were going to be profitable. But Dan Wagner did go on to say that the Microsoft partnerships with Rezolve are at the senior level. Like this is an actual partnership. Okay. He said that Microsoft and Google are actually giving 100% credits to people that want to sign up and become involved with Rezolve. Now, he did clarify that, like in the short report basically said, like Liverpool, for an example, is not a contract with Rezolve, but a contract with Group Buy that Rezolve just bought, and they added that to their ARR. I found it quite fascinating that Dan Wagner actually clarified this and said Liverpool was a Group Buy customer, but shortly after Group Buy was acquired by Rezolve, Rezolve signed a new contract with Liverpool. So just because Rezolve is buying these companies, they're not just necessarily adding that revenue to their ARR. Rezolve says that when they buy a company, it's very easy to go to that company and say, hey, we just bought the company you're already, doing deals with. Check out this software. And the company's like, okay, cool. Sign up, right? Now, there was also a part in the short report, okay, where they tried to say that Rezolve is just a wrapper around like ChatGPT, okay? And Rezolve says that is not the case. Okay, Rezolve, their large language model is specifically catered to retail. So Rezolve said if a user of the Rezolve large language model asks a question like the short seller report did and says, is it a good time to short Rezolve? Then Rezolve's large language model will pull answers from other large language models like ChatGPT. They don't want to have something where if you ask, is it, a good time to short a stock, or what day of the year is it, or, what's the average person's favorite color? Like Rezolve doesn't want to say, sorry, I can't answer that. Like, what good is that? They're going to pull sources from other large language models, but their proprietary technology is really in commerce. So that was the white paper today they released showing that their models do not hallucinate when it comes to retail. They don't hallucinate in general, but the large language model of Rezolve will still pull from other large language models when it doesn't have to do with commerce, which was very fascinating to point that out. That they actually launched an app called MyBrains.zone, which was an app test to try something out about 2 years ago. And that was part of Fuzzy Panda's short report, which was obviously misleading and not true. The Rezolve stopped using it about 2 years ago. The company says a huge amount of growth is coming in 2026, that 2026 will not be a front or back-loaded year when it comes to contracts, that they will update investors as they go, and the path ahead, essentially, for revenue growth and for ARR. Now, the company did say this December, you're going to start actually seeing a lot of that revenue coming to fruition, okay? For the first half of 2025, you only had little over 6 million in revenue, but just in December alone, you're going to have 12 million or more in revenue, let alone November. So you're going to start to see things materialize from ARR contracts to actual revenue. Okay. Now, The company says that they put out these guidance numbers so they can beat them, right? That even though that's the guidance number, they're striving to beat those numbers. Okay, so that's not the top. That's where the company says the floor is. Important to clarify there. They say they're very bullish on beating 500 million in ARR in 2026. They say that they have 250 people in sales/engineers. Dan Wagner says, we are armed and dangerous, quote unquote. I put that quote there because that was powerful. He says that we should expect an update on the crypto business soon. They say that there is momentum building with both partners, Google and Microsoft, that things started out a little bit slow as they got familiar with each other, but things are really accelerating here. They were asked about the timeline of negotiations before contracts, and direct sales is about 3 to 6 months. From the point of a company contacting Rezolve to actually signing a contract tends to be about 3 to 6 months. Now, partnership sales are about 2 to 3 months, Google, Microsoft, etc. But acquisition sales are very fast. Again, because if Rezolve buys a company someone else already has a partnership with, it's pretty easy to upsell them to Rezolve's products. Now, what was also very interesting that the stock reacted very positively to on the conference call was this: the average customer size. Dan Wagner says that 80% of these contracts are less than $1 million a year. And he says like the average contract's like $80,000 a year. Why was that seen as such a positive, or a positive during the conference call for the stock? Well, if contracts are only $80,000 a year, that means there's many companies that are contracting with Rezolve, number one. But number two, the odds are good that Rezolve will be able to upsell existing customers in the future, number one. But number two, there's not a lot of concentration risk. Liverpool, is a large contract. But besides that, there's a lot of different contracts. Like, there's always a risk when you have a business that has like one or two big, partners or customers that, oh crap, what if those go away? Then you have a materially different outlook for the company. Rezolve doesn't have that concentration risk. Now, Rezolve also said that as their professional services business is really starting to ramp up at this point, that they do expect margins to come down a bit. This is the one thing that you may see as a slight negative. Margins were 95.8%. They're crazy, okay? But they did say that net margins or gross margins are anywhere from 18 to 40% for the professional services division. So it is going to bring down margins a little bit, but that's offset with faster revenue growth from the professional services division. So yeah, it was pretty much all good news. And again, from my perspective, just give it a day or two for the residual sellers, the bears that already plan to sell after the conference call if the stock wasn't XYZ price, to level out. And you're going to see those buyers really start to take control again. And we all know how retail investors tend to be. They're very flip-floppy. They'll buy a stock at 7, they'll sell it at 5. If the stock gets back to 8, they'll buy it at 8, right? Like, they're going to get in, they're going to get out, they're going to get back in again. Don't be surprised if that kind of thing starts to happen with Rezolve over the coming days. Now, in option activity, we didn't have any notable trades when I first brought this up, but let's go ahead and refresh and see if any came through. Nope. Still 80% positive order value over the past week. You had a lot of option activity coming through at least yesterday and in some of the scanners today, just not on Ortex. You do have about 600,000 shares, it looks like today, that are being borrowed on net. So that could mean some shorting pressure on the company. But I would argue probably not. Okay. They're probably just going to be returned, but we'll see what happens. Short interest of free float at 9.55%, as I've talked about before. That number is actually way higher because of how many shares are currently held by long investors. Long investors are likely holding 70 to 80% of the float and not really selling, right? Institutions have just started buying. Early retail investors are likely holding. Insiders own about 38% of shares. So once you do get that buying pressure that starts to kick in the stock in the next couple of days, again, in my opinion, you're going to see the shorts really come under a lot of pressure. Rezolve is a stock that can explode with little to no warning. It can go up a lot for no reason. Now, we got the reason. The question is, when does it happen? And that's the biggest question at this point. Now, as far as my position, I did not do anything with my position today, in fact. I did not buy yet. I did not sell yet. As I've said before, I'm very interested in Rezolve in the fours. Maybe it's I don't know, not really an ego thing at this point, but like the stock goes in the fours, yeah, I'm buying more. Now, currently in this portfolio, I have 12,000 shares invested for 103 days. I did buy 1,000 shares in this portfolio yesterday. Average cost currently at $2.97 a share. Current market value, $61,680, up 73% currently. In this portfolio, I did buy another 1,000 shares yesterday as well. Current market value about $72,000, average cost $2.96, currently up about 73.4% or about $30,000. Again, 14,000 shares here. And then we do have the Rezolve 15 calls or Rezolve 250 calls, 15 of them expiring February 20th, 2026. And honestly, I just plan on holding those too. I think the markets are not giving Rezolve the credit that they deserve for the earnings that we got today. I think that's quite obvious. And it might just take a little bit of time, but I do think it is coming. So when I add all of this positioning together, that's 27,500 shares worth, but I do own another 1,000 shares in Webull and 1,300 shares in Thinkorswim. Again, just to be transparent, I currently have 29,800 shares worth of exposure. If you want the dollar amount on that, it's about $152,000 exposed to the stock. And I do believe the path is now well set for the stock to be in excess of $15, $20 per share by the end of the year as we focus on 2026. So yeah, it is also a weird day. Government shutdown. It's kind of a weird day for some stocks. Some stocks are doing well. Some stocks are not. So keep that in consideration as well. RSI is at 45, getting to a washed out point. And I do think, again, the buyers at this level are likely just going to sell out and make their own choice at this point. And that's going to free up things for the stock to start doing exceptionally well. So again, let me know your thoughts on this down below in the comment section. Hit the like button as well as subscribe to the channel. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.